Okay, rather than moving to right into our work session, we have a couple of people that have signed up to speak. So rather than have you sit through our entire work session, which you're more than welcome to do, but I'm going to offer you the opportunity to go ahead and speak before the work sessions, okay? So if I could have Thomas Chapman come up to the microphone and just make sure it's on, push the button, the green light should come on, and just your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak before the work sessions. Okay?
Test.
So if I could have Thomas Chapman come up to the
Mayor,
microphone,
council
just
members,
make sure it's
thank you
on,
for this opportunity to speak.
button, the green
My name is Thomas Chapman.
and just
I
your
live at
name
213 West Third
and
Street,
you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
right across the road here. Test. And I'm here to ask for your help.
Come up to the
Mayor,
microphone.
councilman, leasing for this opportunity is cardboard and trash and piles up there behind the Dollar General. I live at 213 West Third. It's been,
3 minutes to speak.
in my opinion, unacceptable for the last 3 or 4 months. For your help, and it seems like it's getting worse. Leasing the stack of parts is getting bigger. It's up there behind the Dollar General. Employees come out and
3 minutes.
they take away some of the carts, full for the lab, they leave behind most of it. For your help, and it winds out of the north, it blows a lot of that cardboard and trash into my yard, or up there into the street, into the parking lot, come out, and there's still trash out there now, because it winds out the south, they leave behind most of the trash that comes from in. It winds out of the north. Help and into my, whatever ordinances the city has come out, and there's still trash to approach Dollar General, and I understand that there has been some action here in the last couple of weeks. Just within the last couple of hours, there's been, but I've had 2 people out there and kind of cleaned it up. And we're trying to sell our house, and I understand the potential buyer comes and stands in our driveway and looks around. They see all that mess. So we haven't had any luck. So I'm asking you for help in keeping Kennedale looking nice and making it attractive, not only for the residents that live here, because all of my neighbors have talked about this, and some of them have contacted members of the council already. But if and when they do get it cleaned up, please keep an eye on it, not only here, but other parts of the city as well. Keep Kennedale nice. And I would think it would be fairly simple with the laws and ordinances that are already on the books. So appreciate your time and your ears.
Thank you. John De Silva. Same thing, just make sure the microphone's on, name and address.
Good evening. Good to see all of you again. John De Silva, 311 Autumnwood Court. So I'm just here tonight again. Obviously, I'm sure you all know to address the work session item A1. You know, I know there's been back and forth on what the city is willing to do, not to do, whatever. And I respect whatever decision's made, but what I would ask that we can do sooner rather than later is respond to the school district. Because at this point, that's their response is we've gotten no response from the city on our offer. So we're not doing anything until we get a response. So whatever the case may be, we're doing something, we're doing nothing, whatever. All I ask is that we get a response to the school board. So the school board, my neighbors, whoever else can proceed forward with whatever the next steps will be. So with that, I will say have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. We will move into discussion about that in our first work session item, Winding Creek Storm Drainage Update. And who's going to give us that?
At this point, I'm going to refer to our city manager, city attorney, for further update on the response back to the school district. There we go.
I'll reiterate what I've told the council before. There is almost nothing that we can do that won't increase the city's potential liability. We don't own any property involved between the 2 properties. We don't own any infrastructure. Anything that we would do would likely involve the use of motor driven equipment, which is one thing that will waive our tort claims protection. which would make us liable then for resulting damage that might occur to either party. So from a legal standpoint, I have to advise the city that there really is nothing that the city can do without increasing the city's potential liability for getting involved in the middle of this. Having said that, I have drafted a letter that we can discuss in executive session, and we can look at that letter, but from a legal standpoint, there really is, I mean, city doesn't own the property. We don't have any assets in the fight. So there's really not much the city can do.
Mr. City Manager, I was under the impression we would get here tonight and have a response from the city.
We do. I want to refer back to the city attorney. We do have a draft to send back. At this point, we'll like for the council to be able to see the letter that's been drafted to send to the school district itself. Is it something, would you like to go into executive session now so we can come back and have a further discussion if needed?
I would like to be able to give these guys an update on where we stand.
Yeah.
I move that we go into executive session.
I'll second.
Okay, we'll go into executive session 5:39. I don't think we have to vote on it.
Okay, we'll say, yeah, I know that, where's law? Yeah. There's always someone smaller in acre. There you go. Yeah. Standard about response. People who still work thinking about it. Oh, like this one. Yeah. They would have to get where I think that's it. Hopefully, it doesn't go to that. Texas still has a- I don't think that they're playing a big, they will. Get tired of this. The Texas non-conference. It's elevated. Look at. Well, that is so great. Next Thursday, this is one of the board members as well. Yeah. I think that's. Asian baseball, there's usually. That's like your. The reporter told me. Oh, yeah. Trying to get on. Down there. Yeah, there's one thing we're gonna. They're all pretty even. They're driving in. Last time. Yes, they're all. I don't know. Oh, I didn't see the picture. Bunch of plain land. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's great. The number of right-handed pitchers. That's. Yeah. Okay, I played this morning.
Yeah. Yeah. They'll be fine.
Yeah. 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 Hey. Most of those guys already do that. Yeah. Yeah. They go to them once, they figure it out. Yeah. What I, yeah. Now, I don't see.
Well, that's-
That's how it is. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, some aspect of it. Yeah. So there's a game. I'll stay there. Yeah. Yeah, great. Yeah. Yeah. Random spots. Yeah. I've got it umbrella. We're only planning for. There's the blue sticker, a couple of signals. Everything. Play. It's we need to get that good practice. Yeah. Right. So a lot of things. It's really great. And they can go to the millions of percent. That's why. Oh, it's because, yeah, it's just because they actually later. So it's a great insight. Yeah, you're. Yeah. That's one of the really fun things. Doesn't do it now. If you look at it, difference in there's not years old. In the end, yeah. 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 Got drafted once. Everybody involved. Didn't make it.
We are back from executive session at 6:16. And the action as a follow-up to the executive session is that a letter will be drafted and a letter will be sent to the KISD attorney. And I'm just looking at you because I know that you're excited to hear this or you're waiting to hear this, and KISD tomorrow. You're welcome. Thank you. And we will move on to our work session, item number 2, which is discussion on permitting short-term rentals in R1 or specific zoning only. And this has been requested by Councilman Gilly and Horton. There has been a lot of conversation. If you've been watching the news, there's a lot of conversation about short-term rentals. And actually, I think I heard recently Dallas may have spent 5 hours or something coming up with what they would like to do on their short-term rentals. So we're not doing that, okay? We're not going to spend 5 hours, but we do want to discuss kind of, we don't have to go with 5. We can kind of talk about what they decided on and then what you guys are suggesting, and we can kick that around and maybe give it some direction because we definitely don't want it to get out of hand. And so we'll go ahead and open it up to Councilman Gilly or Horton, whichever one of you want to take this.
If you don't mind, Madam Mayor, I'll start. So I believe the idea for restricting it to R1 zoning came out of a conversation that we had some number of months ago. The idea that the problem is caused, there's 2 issues. One is nuisance and illegality that goes on at a short-term rental. And we already have laws against that. We have ordinances against that. The nuisance ordinances, there's all sorts of things that we already have. And I don't think we need to change those. But this comes into what I'll call a legal nuisance. And that is when people are in very close proximity to a short-term rental, even if the behaviors are legal, are sort of a nuisance because it's like having a hotel. You're in effect living next to a hotel. So with the larger lot sizes of R1 zoning, that creates a distance and a buffer. It allows for more parking area. It allows for you to perhaps hang out in the backyard and, have a little party and whatnot, but you're far enough from your neighbor that it's not so much as an impact on their life. Now, I will open this up also that there may be other restrictions that would be reasonable besides limiting it to R1 zoning. And anyway, that's my view.
I'm going to just jump to the attorney just real quick and get your input on, is this from a legal perspective to zone it into just one particular zone with short-term rentals, and what's your knowledge on this?
Well, it's an open question right now.
Okay.
And you are correct. The city of Dallas did debate this at nauseum the other night, and then the city of Plano has been involved in litigation. So there is litigation around the state of Texas, and the Texas Attorney General has also jumped in on the side of property owners and filed a amicus brief against cities that have attempted to regulate it. So at this point, it is what we lawyers call an open question. It is being litigated aggressively by both sides. The property owners are claiming that the cities don't have a right to take away their property rights, their rights to use the property as they see fit. And of course, the neighbors and the other folks that want to regulate them are arguing that, your rights are impinging on mine. But at this point, the courts have not decided. So it's an open question and it's being litigated actively. As the city attorney, my general advice to the city is we don't want to be on the cutting edge of litigation, as that's very expensive. And it would be better to wait until the issue is resolved from a legal standpoint.
And just out of curiosity, maybe Nathan, you could speak to this or possibly Daryl. What neighborhoods do we have that are R1?
I think we only have one that's R1. Nathan?
You knew we were going to get you involved in this, right?
Leader, Mayor, and Council, I believe we have two. I do see on our zoning map that we have a couple other properties that are zoned R1, but as far as subdivisions, Falconwood Estates is a R1 property, R1 zone property.
Okay. Thank you for that. And do you have any, anything that you would, like your thoughts, what you've been hearing with other cities and?
So I do in the sense where my research is on this particular topic is still ongoing. There are a couple other jurisdictions which I believe Councilman Horton has brought up that I'd like to kind of discuss what their current situation is, how they're regulating them, or lack thereof, what their challenges are. There's possibility of maybe council considering looking at the minimum stay requirement. Right now, it's a 1 day, maybe going to a 2 day, a 3 day. I've actually spoken with an operator who indicated that out of the many short-term rentals that he operates, with 1 to 2 here in town, majority of being in a neighboring jurisdiction, when he implemented a simpler policy voluntarily, it eliminated a lot of the problems that he was having. It did make it a little bit more cost prohibitive. Whereas instead of having to pay the rental, all the listing fees that are associated with short-term rentals for a 1 night, when you put in a minimum 2 night stay or 3 night stay, it obviously increases those costs significantly. But I don't know if that's a cure-all at this point. That would be the information I guess I'd have for council at this point.
So I also just want to make sure everyone's aware, we do have a resident that has short-term rentals basically in her backyard, one on one side and one on the other. And they're supposed to be 500 feet apart. Is that right? Or?
We have one that in that particular instance, we have one that's permitted. We have another one that is listed as a long-term rental. Now, recently, I understand that there was an incident that occurred over Memorial Day weekend. What we are asking our community, their assistance is to call when things are getting out of hand. We've had another instance in town where there was maybe a party or whatnot. Our short-term rental policy or we have in place right now, our ordinance prohibits special events, weddings, large parties of that nature, outdoor playing of music during certain hours. But we really need assistance with calling when that occurs so that police department can respond, particularly after hours when this happens. And then I can use that documentation to look at how it violates any permits that are currently on file.
So here's what's happening. The long-term is just doing weekends anyway. So they're just violating the one that's supposed to be long-term, or is that what you say, long-term?
A long-term would be
Short-term?
more than 30 days, month
Okay.
to month.
So the one that's supposed to be long-term is renting for weekends. They're not allowed, because I actually went in the backyard and saw the family that was there for the weekend. And they were just a regular family enjoying the pool, but was just for the weekend, not a long-term. So that's what their issue is what do they do? Because they don't want to really call 911 or emergency when it's simply it's a short-term rather than a long-term, and they're just not renting it out the way they're supposed to.
Well, if that's the case, that don't know what they paid. They may have paid for the month. I'm not sure what exactly that was. And maybe they're utilizing it for just that weekend. I would suspect that that's exactly what occurred, that they just utilized it for the weekend. That violates our ordinance because they're not permitted in that manner.
So is there a process that we can put in place where that she can either email you, or how does she need to document it? What's the actual process then so that you get the issue? She doesn't have to call 911 because it's not really an emergency. It's just, she's just giving you the information. And then you can cite them or,
So there is a process in place when if you list a short-term rental that hasn't been permitted on a site, that it's a Class C misdemeanor. If you operate a short-term rental without a permit from the city, that is a Class C misdemeanor. And even if it's not necessarily a nuisance, let's say it's just a quiet family, but they rented it for a weekend, our police department does a great job with addressing quality of life issues. So I would say this would doesn't necessarily call 911, but you can call non-emergency and we can make contact. The city can make contact and confirm that. So how we go about, I need that documentation. I need something to substantiate. I mean, we do
confirm
have a
that.
complaint, but I have to be able to stand before the court and say at this such and such time,
Yes.
this did occur and this was confirmed by our police department or another party. I'm usually getting a word probably maybe a couple days after the fact. So,
okay.
but I'm hoping we can get some more assistance in that.
All right, well, that was kind of off the subject, but it is part of the problem. And so but we definitely are trying to resolve this going forward so that we don't have, obviously that doesn't happen again where we've got two short terms back to back. But in the meantime, I want to open it up for discussion, more discussion. Councilman Horton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And, if I may say this, and, I know, I think it's a very slippery slope when you have a government telling a citizen what they may and may not do with their property. And, you can look at where that goes in certain countries in the world. So, at the same time, it seems like this problem is in our city. We've got 5 or 7 that are classified as STRs? 4. Okay. So
Right.
4
They've been permitted.
that have been permitted, but it seems like it's just this one area and it's in that proximity. One of them is a cul-de-sac. We've been and we've visited with these folks several times and, and I've talked to them like, have you called the police? And, I know that at least 3 families fear retaliation for calling the police. So I guess what I'm getting at is there, as the mayor alluded to, is there a way where they can document this? I mean, for the purposes that you suggested, and is there anything else you would suggest that we could better regulate the ordinances that I guess they're already on the books?
I would say, just like any other code violation, a photo of a party going on in the backyard does a long way. It establishes at least some sort of reasonable suspicion at some point. So where I can then follow up with that. It's no different than, hey, my neighbor's not cutting their grass in their backyard, right? I can't see that from the street because there's a privacy fence, but on their backyard, the fence is fallen and I can't see that from the street. So maybe they take a picture and they've sent that to the city and then, we can kind of go from there. That'll at least give me some sort of documentation of that. It's a challenge for our department in particular, only because, we work during the day. After hours, we really rely on our community partners, residents, but also our police department, who again, do a great job with addressing quality of life issues, code compliance, code issues. Sometimes we can't reach them during the day. We're knocking on doors, but they may work different schedules, and the police department has been real successful here recently in making contact with people after hours. We're very, very fortunate and grateful for that assistance. As far as what else we can do, again, I'm still looking into that matter. Maybe expanding the distances between the ones that are permitted. There's also been some changes here with this recent state legislator when it comes to creating nonconformities. I haven't read up on the recent changes, but if Carvin, maybe he's familiar with, city attorney is familiar with the recent updates to when the city creates a nonconformity that puts a little bit of liability on the city and some costs that are associated with that. Again, I'm still reading up on what those changes are going to be, but it's certainly going to have some implications on municipalities and their ability to regulate moving forward.
Excellent. Councilman Degenhardt?
So specifically regarding the rental that's supposed to be a long-term rental, I've gone to Airbnb since we've been sitting here, and that gentleman has both of his properties listed as short-term rentals. At one time, one of the properties was relisted as a long-term rental, but since then, his listing status has changed. So there's that. When it comes to this type of regulation, in the past, I have been an Airbnb property owner before. I understand the business side of it. Some people like myself purchase properties specifically with the intent to run a business out of them, or their needs can change. They may need to move for XYZ reason, and they're going to utilize their property to the best of their ability for what makes the most fiscal sense. I'm leery of over-regulating what individual property owners can do. We're talking right now about potentially limiting Airbnbs to a specific zoning code or type. It's a slippery slope, and I have a hard time getting on board with that. I do think that a lot of the enforcement can be remedied by our citizens doing their due diligence. And if they see something, say something, call it in and enable us as the city to enforce the laws that we currently have on the books. So that's all I'll say on it.
May I add a comment to Councilman Degenhardt? And I agree, absolutely. I mean, it's a slippery slope, and you start getting down potentially a dark path when any type of government can say you do this on your property, you don't do this. But I would say that I've also heard what he just mentioned, that it's now mentioned as a long-term. I think that's happened several times. I think he's been, this property owner has, maybe been notified you're out of compliance, and then he switches it to a long-term or short long-term. And then, after the dust settles, I think he goes back to a short-term. I think that's happened a few times actually over the past several months. So is there a way where we can, I don't even know what the proper question is here, but
Let me pick it up from you, Mr. Orton. So currently we have a citation value on the books for this. I don't know what that value is. But do we have the ability to turn that citation into a tiered system? So your first citation for your property owner is $50. Hey, heads up, don't do it again. Your second citation for a violation is $100, so on and so forth. Is that something that we as a council would like to discuss as a way to dissuade property owners from violating the current ordinances that we have on the books?
I see everybody's heads shaking yes.
Okay.
So, yes.
Nathan, if you don't mind, what is the current citation value?
I don't believe the court has that established as a number as of right now. Because I don't think one has ever been issued for that. So what we worked with the court is a number of code violations, putting those in place and assigning the judge assigns what he believes is the applicable penalty for that. Just like any other code violation, the max can't exceed $2,000 per day. And so whatever that is, I don't know right offhand what that citation number is.
Well, I'd like to open it up. Do we as a council have the ability to assign values to these? And I guess that'd be a question.
Well, within the limits that,
Within the limits?
we were just talking about, you're capped at $2,000, but oftentimes each day can be a separate violation. So, I mean,
And my goal in this is not to be overly draconian by any stretch of the imagination. Rather, it's to protect all of the citizens around, allow the property owners to run a successful business within the parameters of the laws and ordinances that we currently have on hand. So, and maybe the best thing to do is to turn this over to both Nathan and the city manager to come up with a recommendation of, hey, this is what the range of fines can look like based upon the violations or repeat violations at hand.
And I may add, I think that would go a long way to alleviate the problem that we're having currently.
Councilman Michaels?
My question on that is, when do you sit there and say, okay, you've done enough violations, when can we yank that permit?
Well, we're talking about a particular instance where there isn't a permit actually even issued there. If you had a particular short-term rental that was permitted and I got a call for service or a CAD sheet or something from the police department, hey, there was a call for service that night. They had a party. They were playing loud music at 11 p.m. There's provisions in the policy that I can issue a notice of violation or notice to that property owner, set a public hearing before council and get that permit actually revoked based off of that. What that threshold is I want to say it's probably been untested here in Kennedale. To speak to the tiered system, that's certainly something that we can look at. The challenge that I'm running into right now is when I get on those websites, it doesn't give you the address, right? So I need to be able to say this occurred at such and such time at such and such location. They don't give you the address until you actually cough up the money, and so you book it, right? And then it gives you that information, and it's listed as a long-term. Or last time I looked into it was as a long-term rental. This one particular instance we're talking about, but they do. I believe they do that for strategic purposes, but also security purposes as well. So that once you actually confirm your booking, it'll give you the address of where it's at. That's been the challenge, trying to find something definitive that says this address is that location. Right now I've got a listing, I've got a photo, but I could assume on that, but I'm looking for something definitive. That's the challenge I'm having right now.
Well, that's the important part, the reason why these neighbors need to make sure they make a phone call and send an email. We cannot prevent it's hard to prevent a crime from taking place, particularly when you start talking about code compliance or even on the criminal side, crime of passions. For us to be able to regulate it, we have to partner with our citizens to be able to speak with us and tell us what's going on. Obviously, we don't have policing at every corner of our city. So it is important, just like when we met with this lady, it's important that she shares that information with us. That's the way we're able to make that step forward. And when you have multiple violations, it becomes a nuisance. And that nuisance is something that you can act on. Yeah, so you can have multiple violations and that violation can start at 200. The next one could be 200. The third one could be 500. And you can just keep going with that tier that you're talking about. But at one point, it becomes a nuisance. It's no longer just a violation of the law. It's a nuisance. Then we can act upon as the council as a whole. When we identify that, and we've had history of it. We had history with the racetracks and we've had history with the SOBs. We went through that process and we survived, and this is no different from this. But our citizens have to give us the opportunity to work the laws that we have in place to help protect them. And obviously, us as a city as a whole on top of it. But that's a very vital part of us being able to go out and implement what you're asking us to do.
And if I can add, I'm sorry.
Let me do this real quick. Councilman Navarez, you have any input, and then we'll go back through. Oh, sorry. I didn't realize that you weren't finished.
One of
Please.
the other things that's been coming up, and I don't know if we have anything, is short-term rentals of swimming pools. So do we have anything that's going to safeguard the city on that? When complaints and stuff like that, when people are renting somebody else's swimming pool?
Did I understand that the short-term rental of just renting the swimming pool?
Yeah, that's a thing. It's Airbnb for swimming pools.
Yeah.
Well, that property, regardless of where the pool, if the pool is located on a residential lot, you still have to register that property as a short-term rental. part of the inspection that we do for short-term rentals, if there is a pool, and there have been pools, is a safety inspection of the pool itself, the equipment, the safety barriers around, make sure they have an alarm on the, like a pool alarm, it's UL listed 2017, it's a specific pool alarm. We ensure that that's provided on site.
Right.
But it would still need to be registered as a.
Right, because it's, the latest deal is the residents are still living there, but they're just renting out the pool. And if they have a pool house, that's part of the rental.
That'd be owner occupied. It would still be a short-term rental and you cannot rent on an hourly basis
They're just renting the pool.
for the day. Well, if they rent it for an hour or two, that violates the short-term rental ordinance. It's citable. If I can get some documentation of that, we can address that. Again, I think some of these other cities that have, as the mayor mentioned on the news, the reason why it's before those particular city councils is that it's generated many calls for service within that community. And so that's where we're asking our community for assistance, is those calls for service. There's documentation. This is how they violated it. When I go before court, just like any other code violation, I have to be able to say, I personally observed this. I observed this. This is the location. This is the time. This was the violator or the property owner's information, and go from there.
Right.
But if people are renting pools for an hour out here in Kennedale, that's news to me.
Yeah.
I need to look into that. So that I was not aware of.
Thank you.
Thanks for bringing that.
No more questions.
Okay, Councilman Navarez.
Just clarify, Nathan, I don't know if we have any of those in Kennedale, but I do know of a few in Arlington. That is a website you can go to and you can rent the pool basically for a pool party or whatever for kids. I'm not sure if that's defined under what you're talking about short-term rentals, so I would probably clear that up with the attorney's office before you move forward with it. But as far as council go, Mr. Dugar, I think is right on the money. I don't think we should get involved in private property and business owners. I'm sensitive to that, but I'm also sensitive to the neighbors. The sellers are really good friends of our families, and I've been with them every step of the way. I do think that, and this happened Nathan's first week of being hired here. It was brought up to him. He's been on the ball on this the whole step of the way. And we do have laws in place that if the property owner is trying to sidestep the laws, they're just as guilty of it as well. So if we told them, hey, no short-term, only long-term, and they switch the long-term and switch it back to short-term, they're just as guilty. I would consider expanding the 500 feet rule to doubling it. That would mitigate a 6x6 square mile by half of the potential. I don't think there's really anybody complaining about spacing out there as far as liability goes. I do think limiting to zones is an issue because that's what Dallas is doing and they will get sued for this. So until the dust settles with that, because there's a lot of big players, not just counties and cities and not just Airbnb, but there's big corporations that own thousands of Airbnb properties and they're getting involved too because it's limiting their money. So until the dust settles with all that, I don't really want to create any new laws other than what some of the cities are doing. And I think the 3-tier system, maybe a 3-strike rule, and we can even have a review of the licensing with like BOA board, since they're a quasi semi-judicial board, to reviews any further violations beyond, let's say 3. Those are the things that I would like to explore. Other than that, I think we should just stay out of it.
Councilman Gilling.
I'll disagree with most everyone on this council. That won't surprise anyone. This is a commercialization of residential property. And if we want to talk about the slippery slope of private property rights, we slid down that slope many, many years ago. If we printed out our UDC, it would be that tall. And all it basically does is tell you how you can use your property. Historically in Texas, the first 2 reasons you establish zoning, number 1, safety. Don't build a fertilizer plant next to a school or build a housing development next to a fertilizer plant. I think we all remember what can come of that. Second reason is compatibility. If you're in R3 zoning and you have, what's your street access on 50, is it 65 feet on R3? Your street frontage, minimum street frontage requirement on R3?
80 for R3.
Yes.
The 80 foot. Are you talking about the lot width?
No, the
frontage?
street frontage.
Well, I would guesstimate that that'd be the same as the lot width because every lot has to front public right of way or an access easement, so 80 feet.
Okay, so now you have 4, 5, 6, 12, 14 cars or a school bus parked in an R3 neighborhood. You are degrading the quality of life of those people that live in that neighborhood, even if the people renting the Airbnb are quite as church mice. You're also creating a safety hazard, getting fire trucks and emergency vehicles in and out. I don't like to restrict the use of private property, but we do that. Like I say, we got to stack that tall. You can't have a rooster. You can have 4 chickens. If I wanted to run a taxidermy business out of my house, I can't do that without a business permit. I couldn't run I can't sell auto parts out of my house. But yet I can turn my house into a hotel. So what I'm suggesting is that maybe it's R1, R2, maybe we limit it, restrict it to R1 and R2 so that there's more space, so that we don't inconvenience and the rental is more compatible with the neighborhood. And the other thing I think why we need to act on this quickly is this other cities crack down on it. Arlington, Fort Worth, Mansfield, they're going to run them to Kennedale. And if we don't get ahead of this, we're going to have a much bigger problem than we have now.
Can I ask?
Could I add real fast, Miss Mayor? I think the city has a lot of tools already to try to control what we have already. The police department has a lead way, like Nathan was already talking about. Nathan has a lot of lead, but also does the fire department as well, who has more power than either one. Also, we can also kick this down to the HOAs. Our HOA, for example, has rules against short-term rentals as well. I know the vineyards do as well. So in this particular neighborhood, they haven't quite done their HOA. They have everything in place. They just never activated. And I've been already encouraged them to do that. And then they don't have to worry about ordinances, because for me, if we're going to make laws just because we can, doesn't mean we necessarily have to, because it unifies across the city. So for me, let the market decide. Let's kick it back down to HOAs. Let's let our departments try to handle what's out there. And then we can just evaluate what we have and how we can maybe perfect the current laws that we have.
Councilman Horton.
In this particular situation, in your estimation, I know you what have you, but what do we need to do to get these people some relief where they're having this problem right now? Because I mean, I think we've been going on this since before Christmas and they're still having the issue. And, I guess that's my number one concern right now.
Need some calls the day of while it's going on. That would go a long way for me. I could look at our ordinance that speaks to listing of the listing itself on the Airbnbs to see if that's if we've met all the thresholds for citable offense on that. I'm not sure if it'll provide the relief, the immediate relief, in the sense to where if they're renting it this weekend and we get a call that night and PD goes out and they're able to substantiate that. Monday morning, I'll get an email. I mean, I get emails all the time from the police department about things that have gone on after hours or over the weekend. So Monday morning, that's enough to revoke a permit for there's provisions. There's a process that we have to go by to at least start the process to revoke a permit for a short-term rental that has been permitted. For the one that hasn't been permitted, that would be enough to put a citation in the mail and set it for court and send it to the registered owner of that property owner or of that particular property. So typically with code violations, I need a signature. But there are instances where I can send it certified mail and the signature on that is just as good as a signature on a ticket.
Can I ask you a quick question? Sorry to interrupt, but I'm just wanting to understand this process. What would you prefer so that we do have a process in place? So when we leave here tonight, we can get back with the resident and say, this is the process. Would you prefer that they call the non-emergency number? And then that way it can be substantiated, as you mentioned, by the police so that they're not just taking a picture and emailing something to you. Is that preferable as the non-emergency number?
I'd like both. The non-emergency number is exactly what it's there for. Unless there is an emergency, but
Right.
I always encourage people, use a non-emergency number and our department, the police department, we're encouraging people to utilize. I mean, we're a resource for you. We want people to call that in. And again, whether it's a high grass and weeds, a junk vehicle, and it's occurring after hours or someone's parked on the grass, they do a great job of addressing quality of life issues. And then we communicate amongst our departments on how to get those issues addressed.
Okay, but so for this specific issue, the process would be call the non-emergency number.
Can I interrupt you just for a second? And I don't mean to.
Yeah, please do.
We're confusing it. If they need to call the police, call 911. It's the same person answering the phone. So if it's 911, if non-emergency, none of it matters. Just call 911. That's the easiest because it's the same person answering the phone.
That's correct.
And they'll transfer it where it needs to go. If it's an ambulance or whatever the case is. So it's easier. And this is something that we've been following for years now is just call 911. That way there's no confusion on it. And they know, the dispatchers know how to go about it.
Okay, so call 911, take a photo and email you.
They can email our code compliance. We have that information up on our website for code compliance, or they're welcome to email me as well.
What would you prefer? Because I just want to give this process to the resident that's having the problem.
Prefer them to email code compliance. It goes to a particular individual. We all have access to that inbox. And there's also a phone number that they can call to speak to them during office hours after the fact. So.
Okay, but for this process specifically, we're asking them to call 911, take a photo and send an email to code compliance. And that is that Todd's email address? Is that okay? And his last name is?
Ellerbrook.
Elderbrook. Okay.
Yeah, if folks go to our community development page, we've got a section there for code compliance. But we really.
Well, I just want to give her a specific. I'm not going to call her up and ask her to go. I'm just going to say, call 911, take a photo and send an email to this address. I mean, for anyone listening, go to code compliance, but for this specific person, she's already having problems. So I want to put something in her hand, her and her husband that says this is what you do specifically. And then are we all in agreement that we would like a tiered system for the citations? Are you shaking your head? Okay. No. Yeah, are we in agreement that that's the direction that we want to go in? That we want, that we would like our city manager and our director to come back to us with okay.
And I'm not necessarily opposed to the R1. I'm just saying, let's proceed with caution, in the interest of the property rights, but.
I think the end game of what we're doing, like we have a lot of stuff on the front end, but not so much on the back end of how we can remedy the situation if it gets out of control. I think some clarification from us would be great on that.
Exactly.
I do have a single question. Madam Mayor, I am in favor of the tiered system, but I do have a question related to the property owner that holds the two Airbnb properties, one short-term, one long-term. I understand one of them is not permitted, the other one is permitted. Because of the willful violation on that unpermitted property, does that give us the force of law to pull his permit on his other property?
I believe so. In this particular instance, I'm not aware of that second permitted one. I'm familiar with the 4 that we have permitted.
Okay.
But I don't believe they're the same owner because that particular instance off of Lone Oak, that's an out-of-state owner out of Florida.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, but we do have a operator in town that operates two in town distances apart. One of them being on Fountain Court, I believe. The other being not too in another part of town. But that's not the one that would be in violation. That one has been permitted and that one has been inspected by the city. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are we good?
I would like to have the dissenting voice. I believe that short-term rentals, private, business use of private residence is incompatible, especially with R4 and R3 neighborhoods. And that if we don't address this, as cities around us get more strict with their STR rules, you will drive them into Kennedale, and this will be a larger problem. So my desire in the minority, 5-1 against, I guess, or 4-1, I guess, is that we look at restricting short-term rentals to R1 and R2 zoning.
Well, can I say this? Because as a voice, and we're not making any decisions tonight, and there's no votes being taken. This is a work session. What I would ask is that our city manager and our director and our attorney stay aware of what's going on. And if it becomes possible or an opportunity for us to look at R1 or R2, that they would bring it back to us and we would have a discussion further about that.
I have a question for the city attorney. Can we spot zone, or is that considered spot zoning?
I don't think that's considered spot zoning yet. Where the courts have had trouble with that is the courts really look at regulating who's in a home or how you're using a residence differently. They have, I mean, we have rental properties all over the city, and we allow folks to rent them on different bases. And so when the government steps in and starts trying to regulate how you rent your property, that's where it's running afoul of the court system. They're saying it's one thing to limit a taxidermist or a business operation in that instance, but to limit who gets to use a home or a residence or a swimming pool, that's where the courts have had trouble drawing the lines. And that's why it's in litigation right now, trying to figure out where that line's going to be drawn.
Okay, are we good?
I'm sorry, I got one more.
Oh, please.
So if we identify as a entertainment district, or if we identify it as an industrial area, is that spot zoning or similar? Is that doable?
Well, spot zoning is illegal. So if we created a zoning district, it would not be spot zoning. We wouldn't do that. But if we created a district because of the unique location and the use that made sense with our comprehensive plan, that would be legal and that would be fine. And it would not be spot zoning.
Okay, thank you.
So can we explore that option as well as we continue? And I'm not against the R1 zoning or R2 zoning. I just, I mean, I would really like to get these folks some relief. I know if we sit here and keep, studying what we got to do, it's going to be December again and they're still having parties, et cetera, but.
I'm in agreement. So the process is currently call 911, take a photo, email T. Elderberry. I'll look it up exactly. We'll give that to her. And in the meantime, we'll look at some tiered citation values that'll be brought back to us. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
No more questions on that. 5-minute break. The time is 7:00.
And then, you know, as long as we pass it.
This one is not.
We are back from our recess, 7:08. And we are going to move around the agenda to we are very honored to have our Commissioner Simmons with us here today from Tarrant County Precinct 2. And she has a proclamation that she would like to read. So we're going to move to the reports and announcements, regular session. It's underneath the item number 2, the updates from the mayor, the Juneteenth proclamation. So Commissioner Simmons, if you would step up to the microphone, and what we'll do is we'll have you read the proclamation, and then we'll have everyone come up and we'll get pictures.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and Council, for the invitation to be here, and to the Moms of Color for the Juneteenth event that took place this weekend. I went to, because you know this precinct covers 6 cities, so I started out at Grand Prairie's parade, came here, then went to Mansfield, and then Arlington. And I was just telling them that this one, while it was one of the smaller ones, it was the most meaningful because I like the history, hearing from the pastor, hearing from the speaker. It just was the most meaningful one. And the rest of them had music and music and music. And so that's why I enjoyed this one the most. It spoke to the occasion. So thank you for the invitation, and thank you all for partnering and putting it on. So I'll read this proclamation that we read at Commissioner's Court on June 6th. Hold on just a second. All right. Recognizing Kennedale Moms of Color and the city of Kennedale on the observance of Juneteenth. Whereas on January 1st, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln signed the final Emancipation Proclamation, which declares all persons held as slaves within any state or designated part of a state shall be thenceforward and forever free. And whereas 2.5 years later, on June 19th, 1865, some 2,000 Union troops arrived at Galveston Bay, Texas, and announced that the more than 250,000 enslaved Black people in Texas were free by executive decree. And whereas the newly freed Black people in Texas came to refer to and commemorate this date as Juneteenth, a term referencing a combination of the month of June and the number 19. And whereas in 1980, Texas became the first state in the nation to recognize Juneteenth as a state holiday. And whereas on June 17th, 2021, President Joseph R. Biden, in a ceremony that included Tarrant County's own Mrs. Opal Lee, who is known as the grandmother of Juneteenth, signed a bill establishing Juneteenth as the 11th holiday recognized by the federal government. And whereas in June 2022, the Kennedale Moms of Color planned and hosted the city's first community-wide Juneteenth commemoration. And whereas the Honorable Mayor of Kennedale, Jan Joplin, and the City Council and city staff, at the urging of Kennedale Moms of Color, voted to officially adopt Juneteenth as a city holiday. And whereas on September 17th, 2023, in the city of Kennedale, Juneteenth will be or was observed with a Freedom Day parade, educational and family activities, food and vendors, and live entertainment in Kennedale's Town Center Park. Now, therefore, be it resolved that we, the Commissioners Court of Tarrant County, do hereby recognize the city of Kennedale and the Kennedale Moms of Color and commend them for their continued efforts to reflect, educate, encourage, and to remember history and promote equality and unity among all people. In witness whereof, we have hereunto set our hands and caused the seal of Tarrant County to be affixed the 6th day of June 2023. And it's signed by our county judge, Tim O'Hare, Commissioner Precinct 1, Roy Charles Brooks, myself, Commissioner Precinct 3, Gary Fickus, and Commissioner Precinct 4, Manny Ramirez.
Be good. Thank you so much.
Take them off for the pictures.
There's a lot of history. Yeah, we'll take a few pictures. And this is what I do want to Miss Rose, you're not coming over? Everybody in? We'll be three picture and then we'll get a big. Everybody come in. All right, and that. Picture. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I want to see one from here. Yeah, but the teacher. Go back, you know, it's not. But I don't. Fine. I hope you got one of the green shoots too. Yes. Yeah. You have to move it around to get the, yeah.
Okay, we will go back to our work session. We have one more item on our work session. Item number 3, discussion regarding the council appointing executive officers for all boards and commissions. Basically what this is all of the boards with the exception of Parks, KKB and EDC, the council selects the chair and the vice chair. I don't know how Parks created their own ordinance so that they choose their own, but they're the only one of the boards that have an ordinance saying that they select their chair and vice chair. So the idea is, since the boards report to council and we select the boards, that we would select the chair and the vice chair of all boards, including Parks. So that's what this discussion is in reference to. So we will open this up to anyone that would have a comment.
I'll go first because I'm probably the one that's standing alone on this. I'm in dissent of anything remotely similar to this. For me, it's consolidation of power for us, and I just see and have felt the abuse of that sometimes. as a Parks Board chairman for so long, I understand that sometimes when you're appointed, you just don't know what's going on or who to vote for. But the problem in the last 10 years is when you use the politics behind it to move boards around, you lose good volunteers. And so if we didn't do that, we would have some of our volunteers that were there and experienced for a long time, and you wouldn't have the I'm new and I don't know who's on here. For me, I would have preferred to see this council bring things to this that will give more responsibility to these boards and let them have their own input on how to do themselves. And you're correct, Mayor, the Parks Board is the only one that has clear rules in our bylaws on how they should treat themselves. And for me, it's just such a benign thing. Just let them figure it out for themselves, those three boards. The other three, a little bit more primary boards that you can get in trouble with as a city or as a board. And so I don't have a problem with us appointing those executive officers, but things like Parks and KKB, those are volunteers with big hearts. And I just think that we lost a lot of people with big hearts because of politics. So for the future, I just don't want to see us getting involved with that. And I would prefer if we brought things that gave them more responsibilities or more things to do. And that way we can keep people longer on these boards because they feel like they're having some input with not only themselves, but with the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Degenhardt?
Madam Mayor, I'm in favor of uniformity and standardization between all of the departments and SOPs that the city engages in. So if we have an outlier that does things differently, then I would be in favor of looking at consolidating it to reflect the standard procedures for the other boards as well.
Councilman Michaels, any comments?
Sure, I have a comment. I think I'm in favor of actually to where we set an ordinance where we'd actually pick the board members and we pick the executive officers, because when we go through the process of interviewing them, then that we can find the right person that's can communicate and it's actually going to take the time to do the homework to be able to run a board like it should be done.
Councilman Horton?
You know, ultimately, I'll go with what this council decides, but I would also be in favor of the council appointing the executives. You know, just point being is to echo what Councilman Michaels just mentioned.
Councilman Gilly?
The only view that I have is I know that over the last probably 18 months, the Parks Board has had a problem having a meeting with a quorum. I want to say there's only in the last 18 months, there have been 5 meetings or a handful of meetings with a quorum. So Jeff, I know that you and Ken both are experienced with the Parks Board. Would appointing a chairman, would that have any impact on perhaps firming up the board so that they would have regular meetings with a quorum?
To answer your question, Rocky, the reason why we didn't have a quorum is, I believe, last time you were on council, I became before the board to have you guys expand the membership for backups, but also reduce the quorum. And there was some conflict between the city and I on that clarification. It just took a few months for get that clarification. The clarification was we just needed 3, not 4 to have some quorum. So we did have quorums. We didn't know for sure until that was cleared up. And that was mostly the change of city managers and change of staff during that time. It just kind of got lost in translation. And the city manager did clear that up with us a few months ago to where we could have more quorums. In the meantime, the issue also was some of the great people that were on the boards for a long time, it just felt like they were neglected or pushed off. So we just lost a lot of long-term people on there. And it was just hard for this council to find people to reappoint that would stay for more than a year. I would say it's just a perfect storm of situations. I don't necessarily disagree with Mr. Michael's interpretation, but I've also seen this council appoint chairmans that just were weak chairmans. Just because we have the decision doesn't mean our decision's right. I think in the end, it's just best for the boards that are remaining, the three boards, to let them decide for themselves. And instead that we come up with some responsibilities for them. That way they can have some say and some worth in what they're doing.
All right, so I'm going to assume that you are in favor of.
I'll follow the will of the
Okay.
rest of the council. I'm not, I mean, I can kind of see both sides of it.
Well, I didn't mean to put words in your mouth. I was just
Yeah,
asking you. I was just trying to get to a bottom line.
So
and-
I'll just, I'll defer to the will of the rest of the council on this one.
Mayor, since I'm in dissent, can I just rebuttal everybody real fast? I'll make it quick.
Sure.
My biggest concern again, and I think this council will move forward together. I think the city is going to move forward. My idea is to prevent this 10 years from now, if there's another political struggle, that we just don't lose good volunteers. We've lost so many good volunteers in the past. And for me, this is just more consolidation to the council. And I'm a firm believer of, I'm firmly against something like that. I think we should be delegating more powers to these boards. So as a conservative, I'm going to stand. I hear what you guys are saying. It's probably a benign issue, and I'm sure some of you feel that way, which is why you're whatever y'all want is the response. But for me, this is a protection of our principles of democracy or a constitutional republic. So it's such a small thing. And you can say that for me, though, you give an inch, they're going to take a mile. And every time we give an inch on something like this, it's just when the next board comes or next city council, they could take another inch, and pretty soon we're far from that mile. And I think there was good wisdom in our past councils to set this up the way that it is now. I just don't see a great reason to change that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My personal thought on this is, since the other boards to fall in line with the other boards. And I think that as we have really great chair and great vice chairs, that speaks to people wanting to be on the boards. I don't disagree that there should be a responsibility there. And I think now with us having our board meeting and them understanding that they are all part of one team, but I think it's our responsibility to make sure they understand what their responsibility is. So I'm not disagreeing with you there. But what we'll do is we're going to go into executive session at the end of the meeting, and we will come out with an action on this specific piece, as well as the other boards that we're going to make decisions on in executive session. So for now, we'll go ahead and wrap this particular conversation up. Okay. And we will move to Councilman Michaels. Did you have another comment you wanted to make? Okay, all right. We will move on to reports and announcements, updates from our council, and we'll start with Councilman Navarez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's been an interesting start to my tenure here, and I've been hitting the ground running with a lot of city activities. A lot of them that you guys gone to recently. The Juneteenth, I went down to the Commissioner's Court. We went to the TLA. Was that what it was called? TLA, the dinner list. Yep. Which was really great. I look forward to going down near Austin and getting some training down there on how to do this as well. I also on the side met with Magnolia Hills HOA. And really got to talk to the citizens there on their concerns and really just kind of explain things like the principles of democracy and why cities should do or should not do. And a lot of them just never have been explained that. And I think in the end, we all agreed on a few items that I briefly spoke with you, Mayor, about. And I've also spoken with Daryl about, which is the street minimal setbacks on streets moving forward. But other than that, it's been a great time the last 30 days, just kind of hitting the ground running. I'm already out there, and all you guys know I've always been out there, but it's different now, and it's been really enjoyable.
Excellent. Councilman Degenhardt.
A couple of weeks ago, we had some great city events. We had the barbecue competition, and a lot of effort from our fire department went into that. City staff, I'd like to make sure everyone that was a part of that is recognized, and thank you for your hard work. We had Bark in the Park. We had Kidfish. I attended both of those as well. I'm really proud to see the strides that our city is making towards our community involvement, and ultimately where we're going.
I agree. Thank you for that. Councilman Michaels.
Good golly, do I have a list. Started out with the chamber luncheon. It was the best of the Kennedale Awards. Attended that. The PD appreciation dinner for Police Officer Week that was put on by Miss Boyd. And then we did the board banquet that Miss Boyd decorated. I wanted to thank her. She does an amazing job when it comes to decoration. I did attend
Here, I agree completely.
the barbecue cook-off, the kid fish and the bark in the park. On Memorial Day, I attended Emerald Hills tribute service for Memorial Day, and I did attend the Kennedale Alumni Association annual Memorial Day at the high school. Little field trip down to the Tarrant County Courthouse for Commissioners Court for the proclamation for the acknowledgement of the city of Kennedale's Juneteenth. I did attend with the mayor and Councilman Navarez, the TML Region 8 meeting. And I was at the Juneteenth parade. And a little reminder, July 8th is KKB second Saturday work day. And if anybody wants to come up and work, come on up. I'm normally out here every Wednesday too, working with KKB. That's it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Councilman Horton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First, I want to send a heartfelt thank you to Keep Kennedale Beautiful for the adopt-a spot. My family has gotten one on Little Road, kind of where it runs into the parkway there. And that spot's very special for my family because my father grew up on Little Road. So really look forward to having my kids get out there and overcome their laziness and serve their community at the same time. So additionally, I did get to attend the Chamber of Commerce Best of Kennedale Awards and really enjoyed that and saw some great people who love the city, making a great impact. Additionally, I got to go to the barbecue cook-off. I was a judge, ate way too much that day and really enjoyed it. And I have no apologies for that. Also, the kid fish, bark in the park, and just a shout out to our city, our citizens that, we ran out of fishing poles at the kid fish. And I think that's, even though my kids didn't get to fish, just running out of the poles that day that's a great thing that, a lot of community involvement. Further, got to attend the boards and commission banquet at the venue at Serenity Falls. Very nice location. Got to meet a lot of great people who really love our community and all the great things that they're doing and they're serving their service. Additionally, got to attend the police appreciation dinner. Thank you, Ms. Lori. That was just really fantastic. Thank you for inviting us. Thank you for not kicking us out with our kids running around wild. And the food was absolutely delightful. And if you've not had a chance to get to try Ms. Lori's cupcakes, you're not living. You're doing it wrong in life. Further, I attended that last month's EDC meeting. A lot of good things going on there, and look forward to our upcoming meeting. And then finally got to attend the Commissioners Court. I believe that was on June 6th. Was it June 6th? And it was my honor to get to attend our Juneteenth parade. And really great day for our city. Too bad it was like 130 degrees outside, but that was still fun nonetheless. And sorry to steal Councilman Dagenhart's salutation earlier today, but I hope everybody's enjoying our nice Arctic blast. So that's all I got.
Councilman Gilly.
Well, in the interest of time, I won't go over the board attendance. Some of the ones previously mentioned I attended, some I didn't. I spent some time talking to some people who live on New Hope Road and tried to explain to them why there's not much we can do about the train stopping, that we do what we can. Our options are limited. The interest of the state is more in line with the interest of the railroad than interest of public safety and the citizens of Kennedale. Also try to explain to them why the bridge is 4 months behind, and did my best to relay how things don't always work out as planned. Spent some time talking to some about 3rd Street, about why, let's see, was it March? Did it start in March, and now we're almost middle of June and it's still torn up. So I just say that during those conversations, a fun time was had by all.
Excellent. So for me, I'm not gonna bore you also with my list, but I'm just gonna say this, that summer is here and we're seeing triple digits on the horizon day after day. And if you would like to donate a box fan or any finances for the needs of the seniors, I would ask that you get with Sarah at the Senior Outreach. You can find her on Facebook because the seniors are really going to be hit hard by this heat and the increase in inflation and rent and all of that. So they could really use the community help there. Also, Meals on Wheels is in need of volunteers taking food out into our shut-ins. And you can reach them. It's on my Facebook page, but the phone number is 817-258-6426. Also with the heat, as many of us know, the storms came and knocked out our electricity. How many of us had their electricity out? I did. Yep, 3. So it's really important that if you haven't signed up for the emergency alert, that you signed up for the emergency alert, and you can subscribe to that on the City of Kennedale website. And that way, because what I get is, even if there's a heat advisory, I get a phone text, of what's going on. And so we just need to stay connected in every way that we have the opportunity to. So everything that everyone mentioned, with the exception, I think of maybe one thing I attended. It's been so much fun this past week. It was really fun putting my update together because I reflected back on the Kid Fish and the Bark in the Park and seeing so many people at Sonora. It was just incredible. So when I arrived at 8:00, what time did the event start? 9. So I arrived around 8:30. The front parking lot of Sonora was already full. And and then the second part was already filling up. I mean, it was so many people there. I think we ran out of fishing poles about 8:30, about 9:00, 9:15, 9:30, 9:15. And, kids were still coming, and Councilman Michaels was out there making fishing poles for people and fixing their lines. And my husband went home to get a fishing pole and gave it to a kid. And I mean, it was incredible. And then we moved right from that to the Bark in the Park, and our police came out with their new vehicle, and the fire engine was there. The new fire engine was there. And we were just showing off. That's all I'm saying, is we were just showing off as a community. And I just looked around. I had just such a good time. I don't know who was out there training their dogs, but there was a training class out there, and they came out and did a whole training class and graduated a whole class of dogs. And it was just fun. And then there was a line 1 mile long for the vaccinations that were being given. And so it was just really fun day. And then we got to end it at Kennedale Speedway Park. And what was so great about that is we partnered with them to do this barbecue event. And that's the first time that we've partnered with them. So it's wonderful to see the city and our businesses partnering. And it brought a lot of people. There was a cornhole tournament. It was just a lot of fun that day. And then several of us stayed and watched some dirt racing that night. And that was fun. The memorial tributes were amazing. I was very honored to attend both of the memorial. And if you would like a flag displayed at your house, on the main flag days, contact the Kennedale Rotary. And I just want to give special thanks to the outgoing Rotary President, Dr. Maria Douglas, for the invitation to have a Q&A with my friend, Mayor Stephanie Boardingham of Forest Hill. We did that a couple of weeks ago. And but having that flag delivered, I love that. It's just such a treat. And then seeing them all along my neighborhood, it's really a wonderful thing, and a fundraiser for the Rotary as well for the scholarship.
And 100% of those, the money from the flags go to KIC students for
the scholarships. Yeah, it's wonderful.
And there's also a fundraiser for their seniors for their homecoming. I'm sorry, not their homecoming, but and what's the end of the year for seniors party?
Graduation.
Prom. Thank you.
Oh, the prom. Okay, excellent. What else did we do? The Juneteenth parade was amazing. It was a wonderful day. I even feel like the weather kind of contributed to a great day because it was cloudy that morning and it wasn't hot because the next day was horribly. So I think the weather cooperated with us on that day, and the Kennedale Moms of Color, they just did a great job putting the event together. And special thanks to Commissioner Simmons came out, Constable Lee came out, all of our constables were there. We had our police out there. It was just a really great day. And in between all of that you've heard, we actually squeezed in, and no one mentioned this, 2 workshops. We had 2 council workshops on the 6th and then the next on the 15th. So. Oh, 3. Okay, there you have it. So see what I mean? We can't even keep up with all the things we're doing. But so what I would recommend is stay connected to events. There's several Facebook pages that you can look at, because I hear all the time, well, I didn't know that was happening. Well, I didn't know that was happening. So you're going to have to connect on the city website. My Facebook page, the city manager has a Facebook page, City Hall has a Facebook, the library has a Facebook page, the police have a Facebook page, the fire department has a Facebook page. Anyone else over there? No, I covered everything. Okay. Max, you got one? No. So connect to those Facebook pages and stay connected. And with that, I'll turn it over for our city manager to give us some updates. And one more thing, I am so thankful. I know what Councilman Gilly was talking about, the issues with the infrastructure, but I'm so thankful that we are getting some of those roads taken care of. We're getting the bridges taken care of. We're getting 3rd Street. We're getting New Hope taken care of. So I'm very thankful to see that progress. So with that, if you have updates for us.
Mayor, you've done a great job on your update along with the rest of the council. And thank y'all for being involved in the community as much as you guys are. It means a lot, not only to me, but to the citizens in our community as a whole. So thank you for that. Just kind of help out Mr. Gilly. Our railroad construction is actually back to work. So hopefully within the next 6 to 8 weeks, hopefully we'll have a brand new bridge that we can crawl or drive across and indicate it's ours. The update on 3rd Street, the completion is very, very near. We are also working with Tarrant County Precinct 2 to hopefully save a little bit of money on the construction side of 3rd Street and allow Tarrant County Precinct 2 come in. And hopefully once completion, they can come in and do their part that we have an interlocal agreement with. And that's roughly going to save us a little over $100,000 if we can do so. Looks like we're probably about 4 weeks of completion date versus Tarrant County being able to come out. But that's still an ongoing process. But the completion's coming, and hopefully this summer we'll have a brand new road to look down and be proud of. Other than that, that's all the updates I have.
Introduce the fire marshal.
Actually, Fire Chief, is he there? Oh, there he is. If you would come up for a second, I'd like to just generally we do a swearing in for our fire and police. And I know last Friday you guys had done that for Melvin. And if you would give me just a council an update of who he is and what his purpose and why he's here.
Yeah, absolutely. He was going to be here tonight, but he wasn't able to hang. So Melvin came to us from the city of White Settlement. He started his career as a volunteer in 2000 and progressed through his development there and became the first arson investigator, fire marshal for the city of White Settlement. He worked there approximately 9 years. And after that, he got this bright idea to go to work in the private sector. After working 2 years in private sector, he got laid off from Lockheed Martin and came to us pretty soon after that. So there's a fire marshal, there's a fire investigator, and an arson investigator. So the differences are a fire investigator, I can go out and investigate fires. And if I see that it is a criminal offense, I have to rely on getting a police officer to carry out the criminal investigation on that side. So Melvin is a police officer also. So he's able to be an arson investigator, do the fire investigation side and complete and have the experience to work on the prosecution side or the criminal side associated with that. So great asset for us. He's only been with us 2 weeks now. Maybe this is his third week. Been a good grab for us, as so many of the folks we've more recently hired have been great for our city. So any questions?
What does he do for us as a fire marshal? What does his duties entail
So
other
his-
than the investigation?
Okay. So his duties are code enforcement of the fire code. He works hand in hand with our code enforcement with the city itself. Fire prevention is part of his title as well. So that's education of the kids in the town, working with the school districts to push that education forward. That's a big part of what he does. So historically, we enforce code within the city. Having a fire marshal that's able to do that on a day-to-day regular basis has that consistency for us going forward. So it's incredibly important for our city to develop in the future.
Excellent.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's part of what I just said. You just didn't get the inspection side of it. So presently we do inspections off the fire truck. So one of the small issues that we run into, if we catch an emergency call while they're out doing inspection on one of the local businesses, they're gone. And they may be back in 30 minutes or they may not make it back that particular day. So our fire marshal is able to, he coordinates all of our business inspections. He oversees and completes all of our CO inspections. And more importantly, working with the schools on their inspections to make sure that we close the loop on making sure that the schools are a lot safer going forward. That's a big responsibility for him that we're working hand in hand with the school district. So.
Excellent.
Did I get where you wanted?
Keep fishing. Thank you, Chief. Thank you for everything that you and your guys do. They're amazing. All right, we're going to move to finance reports.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I think we've been here about 9 weeks, and last week I had to listen to the work session while I was driving, and I knew all of your voices already. So that take what you will from that. So we're about a little bit over 58% through the fiscal year. If you look at our general fund, all of our spending is well behind pace, depending on how you want to look at it. We're not at 58% at any of our sections except for non-departmental, and we're actually beating last year. So as far as expenditures go, we're doing pretty well. About 71% of our expenditures in the general fund are personnel related. That's a big reason why we're ahead of pace right now. Is there any questions on the general fund before I move? Okay. It's pretty similar trend as you go through all of our funds. Revenues pretty much online and expenditures are below, even in our water fund. Yeah. Just giving you guys a chance to review. Yes, sir.
One clarification question. A couple of statements back. You said that the personnel cost was what percentage of our general fund?
71% of the
71.
expenditures in the
Okay.
general fund through April
Okay.
are personnel related.
Okay.
So that's not just wages, that's retirement, that's payroll tax, health benefits, and so forth.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So the only thing, it's not a question, but
Okay.
I do like seeing that on the general fund that our tax revenues are up over about $150,000 over last year. I appreciate being able to just see that quickly in summary. And as well as the tax revenues, let's see, where's that at? It shows that we're received year to date 5. Does it say what it was last year?
Last year today was 4.8.
Okay, 4.8. All right, so we're a little bit over on that as well.
So we're a little behind a budget there. I have received letters from the appraisal district. There were some people that filed protest and those still haven't reached a resolution yet, but we should see some additional revenue once those protests reach a conclusion.
Excellent. Does anyone have any questions? No? All right, thank you so much.
Okay, thank
Glad
you.
to have you. Glad you recognize our voices.
Well, yours is a little bit easier than the
A
rest.
little bit easier, right? Okay, so we've already had our visitor and citizen forum. We don't have any additional speakers tonight? No, ladies, can't take you up on it. All right. So we'll move to our consent agenda. There's 3 items. We're going to table item number 2. Those minutes are not ready yet. So item number 1 are minutes from the May 18th regular meeting. Item number 3 is, it's actually would you call it an amended ILA? Yes, the amended ILA from what we originally had with precinct 2 of about 700 and something thousand dollars to, they've actually extended additional miles that they're going to cover, additional feet they're going to cover, I guess you'd say that. So, and that's thanks to a meeting that we had with them. And they agreed, yes, we do want to cover the whole thing. And so the adjustment on that is from about 700 and something thousand. They're now actually going to be contributing towards the roads $1.2 million. Did I say that correctly?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we went from $740,000 contingency money from Tarrant County to 1.2 million. That additional funding is basically so we can complete New Hope Road. Before it was slotted for sections. With the additional funding, it will allow New Hope Road to be completely rebuilt from Hudson Village Creek all the way to the Kennedale Parkway. As you know, part of it has already been completed. The other portion of that funding is also for Sweeney Height. Currently, Sweeney Height is still kind of broke up throughout the whole continued road. But we're still working on that process. But as of right now, New Hope Road will be completed, or is projected to be in 2024.
Excellent. So that's our third consent item agenda. Does anyone want to remove items 1 or 3 for discussion? If not, I'll take a motion to approve 1 and 3.
Madam Mayor, I make a motion to approve consent agenda items 1 and 3.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I will second it.
All in favor? Unanimous. All right, we're going to move to the items for individual consideration. Number 1 is consider approval of the project utility adjustment agreement for the TxDOT Southeast Connector project. And so we have Max here.
Hey, good evening, Mayor and Council. I know some of you are new, so my name is Max Aronson. I work with Shield Engineering. We are the consultant engineers for the city of Kennedale. So the agreement that's on the agenda tonight is an agreement between the city of Kennedale and TxDOT's contractor. They're the ones riding around the orange trucks. They're South Point Constructors. This agreement is to allow them to relocate some of our utilities that are pretty much right along the frontage road along 20, and as well as a couple utilities along Bowman Springs that Kennedale owns to make way for the new roadways that they're going to be constructing. So this agreement allows them to relocate one water line, I think a couple manholes and a couple service lines.
Excellent. Questions?
I guess this is an opportunity for those lines to be upgraded and
Yes.
and they'll be new. I guess the concern that I would have is disruption of water supply while they're moving them. And how they could mitigate that.
So they don't have a formal plan that's been presented to us, but typically for a water line construction that they're doing, it's actually going to be at a different location. So what they'll do is they will install the new water line, put it in place, and then they'll test it, basically make sure it's potable, safe for human consumption. And as soon as that test is done, they will isolate the system to basically shut down that section that needs to be relocated and then tie in. All of that typically happens within a few hours. So we'd anticipate the interruption to be pretty minimal.
So we don't foresee any contingencies or anything like that that could put people without water for like an unforeseen or long amount of time. Or in other words, we've considered every possible thing that might delay that or go wrong.
So we have already reviewed the engineering plan. So those are approved by the city of Kennedall already. I don't foresee that. If I remember correctly, the water line relocation actually doesn't have any service lines on it. It's just an actual to basically create a loop system for the water line. So it just circulates throughout the subdivision.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Michaels?
I have no questions. I do see that there's no services on that line that you're looking at. And there's actually two valves that y'all could shut off or can be shut off and shouldn't affect anybody's water when this happens.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Degenhart?
Hi, Max.
Hey.
Have you read the contract that TxDOT has given the city to sign?
I have not read it in fully, but we have had the city attorneys review it.
Counselor, have you read this contract?
Fortunately, I didn't have to read it, but my partner did read it and he read every word of it and he had to negotiate with them over a number of changes and was eventually satisfied that it did protect the city's interests.
I have two sections of the contract that I have concern with.
Okay.
The first one will be on page 19. It is page 29, item number 19.1. And it has to do with breach by the parties in the event that one of the parties is in breach of this contract.
Not sure I'm finding the page you're talking about. Yeah, how did you number it?
It must be on your PDF.
That's on the PDF. That's correct. Page 29 of 106 of the TxDOT.
What does it look like? Because ours aren't numbered.
The top of it says Texas Department of Transportation form, page 13 of 17.
13 of 17.
Yeah, you're right.
There you go.
And ultimately, we're signing this agreement on behalf of TxDOT with South Point contractors. But the breach language says that TxDOT shall have no liability to the owner, City of Kennedale, for any act or omission committed by the design build contractor, so on and so forth. So, but it doesn't give us any form of remedy in the event that there is a breach of contract.
That is absolutely correct. And that was a point of contention and we could not get TxDOT to change that.
Okay.
We had no leeway with them whatsoever.
So the second point of concern I have is going to be on page 15 of 17, item number 25, equitable relief. And Max, this one is dovetailing off of Councilman Gillian Horton's concerns about interruption of services. The design build contractor and the owner acknowledge and agree that delays in the adjustment of the owner utilities will impact the public convenience, safety, and welfare. And that, without limiting the parties' remedies hereunder, monetary damages would be inadequate to compensate for delays in the construction of the project, so on and so forth. So my concern is this project, I'm in construction, that's my industry, as you well know. Things happen. We have a delay. There's a paragraph that talks about equitable relief, but it doesn't provide any remedy hereto for the city or our citizens.
It's the same problem. I mean, we pointed out these sections to them and TxDOT would not relent. This is their form and they would not change.
So where does that leave us from a risk perspective? are we comfortable with the risk that is on the table?
I have to say yes. At the end of the day, it didn't cost the city any money to put these changes in. And so we were willing to accept the risk.
And I guess my concern is something happening and the project getting X way complete and South Point going bankrupt and another company having to come in to pick up the pieces. And small one-off agreements like this typically get missed in the overall scheme of things. So I'm voicing my concern. I'm not providing dissent saying I'm not going to vote for it or against it. I'm just providing my 2 cents of concern.
So is it fair to say that should such a situation occur, we're kind of at TxDOT's mercy? Well, I bring it up because I could think of another such scenario that's going on now.
I think ultimately we would be over a barrel.
That is actually correct. That is absolutely correct. And that is the problem when you do business with TxDOT.
Councilman Navarro, oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. So is $500,000 of freebies worth the risk of larger cost should something go south? That's the question on the table from my perspective. I'll shut up now.
No, that's very valid questions. Councilman Navarro?
Good catch, by the way. Is that a deal breaker for you?
No, it is what it is. The 20s going in, it's going to happen at some time, whether it's South Point or another contractor, at some point over the next 5-10 years, it's going to be finished. But I'm just pointing out that there is real risk in the contract that has been presented to us, and we need to be aware of said risk going into this agreement with TxDOT and South Point.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
All right, with that being said, I will take a motion for would you like to, before
Yeah, this is for Carmen. I know in some of the language that was going back and forth, that was a huge topic of the liabilities and that. And I'm sorry, I can't actually recall exactly which one it was, but it was in reference to that. And I don't know if you can, I know you can't read my mind, but there was a discussion in reference to the liabilities that were coming along with that. And I agree, we're talking about TxDOT and we couldn't even, it was a third-party contract and TxDOT doesn't even want to recognize that. So the difficulties that our city attorney is explaining, I didn't necessarily believe it either, but my opinion, TxDOT they put themselves above a lot and wouldn't allow some of the changes we requested to take place. And that's the reason why I was here today. And with that sense, with the liabilities that are coming with it, I don't want to say we don't have a choice, but the choice wasn't really in our direction to be able to correct it. Okay.
Thank you for that. So with that being said, I will take a motion on the project for TxDOT Southeast Connector project. And think about it, it's all right. You have to roll it around, I understand.
I will just offer this along with what city manager was saying. We spent probably 9 weeks negotiating this back and forth. And at the end of the day, again, I wasn't the one personally involved in the data negotiations, but it is the city attorney's office recommendation that the city execute this contract. Because again, I think it is the best we could do given the party we were negotiating with and the fact that I think the city does want this project to happen in the time frame that we're talking about. So at the end of the day, I still recommend execution or approval of the contract.
Madam Mayor, I make a motion to approve the project utility adjustment agreement with TxDOT.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, so I have a motion to approve and a second. All in favor? Unanimous. Yeah, so it's a lot to think about. You gotta, you have to think about that. I completely understand and I really appreciate it, actually. So we'll move on to number 2, consider approval of the proposed park zone boundary map. And this is a map that allows us to use our park dedication fund, and we just needed the map to be able to use that. So we now have the map. It's been approved by our park board and our P and Z. And so now it's for us to approve it. And again, that's basically what all this is just a map that allows us to use the park dedication fund. Do you have anything that you'd like to add to that comment? No? Any questions on this? No? All right. So I'll take a motion.
Madam Mayor, I make a motion to approve the proposed park zone boundary map.
The motion a second?
I will second it.
All in favor? Unanimous. Yay. So excited about that.
I'm super excited about that.
Park fund. Okay, we are moving on to number 3, discuss and take action on a resolution authorizing publication and posting of notice of intention to issue certificates of obligation to finance the acquisition, construction, and equipping of various public improvement projects totaling 17.4 million. And this is we'll turn this over to our finance director. We'll let you kick this off.
I know this was the main topic of discussion last week, so I don't really have anything to add at this point outside of we have received the 3 bids for the water rate study. The range between the 3 is about 27,000 to a little bit, well, I'll call it 32,000 between the 3. I received the 3rd one this morning. I'm analyzing to see what the difference is between the 3, mainly focusing on timeline. I believe all 3 are capable, but this may be a situation where that who could finish early would get the lead on a decision making, but I'm looking forward to presenting those results to council at a future date.
All right, thank you. Yes, and you're absolutely correct. We've now had 3 workshops on the bond. I don't know if anyone brought all their information with them, but if there's any questions, so what we've been presented just for our audience and people watching online is we have received an updated spreadsheet with all of the past borrowed monies and as best as possible where it was spent, including this proposed 17.4, where it will be spent. And we've received information from Samco on the bond, as well as a 5-year finance report with the bond and how the bond will be paid back. We've received the detail on that because it'll be split from some general fund and some utility, with the most part being utility of 15 million. And then the actual payback of the bond, the detail on that. So we have had several workshops on this. We've gotten a lot of information on what this is going to be for. And if you want to discuss like mainly the breakdown of the 15, just so we can just in summary before we make a motion on the intention to have
It's
this.
pretty contained. The 13 million is for the sewer line in Basin B that's technically going from the Texas Raceway property to Interstate 20 as phase 1, 2, and 3. We'll assume the 13 million, the additional 2 million for 14 and 15 that will be used roughly for the storage tanks, the 500,000 gallon and the 750,000 gallon. With an additional 2.4, basically in a sense for contingencies and for any improvements that's needed within any of these projects in place and for ARPA funds to be used for some of the same purposes.
Absolutely. So are there any outstanding questions? And sorry, I kind of trailed off because so our intention tonight is to take action to authorize the publication and posting of the notice of intention to issue, because that's the steps that we have to take. So that's what we're doing tonight. And we've received all the information. So with that, does anyone have any more questions or comments before we take a motion?
I ask that we I move that we consider changing the language to ask up to 17.4 million instead of as currently written as 17.4 million.
I'll second that.
Is that a problem?
I believe it is.
That's
actually Yeah. what
it said.
Yeah.
Double checking the notice.
Yes, it's the verbiage on D3. What it appears to me that we're actually voting on says the acquisition, construction, equipping of various public improvement projects totaling 17.4 million.
The actual resolution, if it
Okay.
says not to exceed.
Okay, all right.
Perfect.
You are correct. Sorry about that.
That's okay. No problem. Any other questions?
I overlooked that.
Just for a matter of public record, are we in a position to do a large loan like this? And then secondary, does this cover, I know you've projected this, but inflation and things are getting way more expensive just in a couple months versus 9 months when we start this. Are we giving ourselves enough buffer room up to?
That was the reasoning behind how we actually elevated the top end of this from our first discussion was due to the overhead, you want to call it inflation, increasing costs, but that's, yes, sir.
So we're comfortable with this number if we had to start building a year from now?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No, just a statement for the people following along at home. What we're discussing is a certificate of obligation for up to $17.4 million for water and sewer improvements. The debt service the first year will be carried by the general fund. For the year or some part of the year afterwards, it will be reimbursed or covered or funded by the water and sewer rate increase that will come from the rate study. And currently, as is being discussed, that rate increase will be approximately 10% the first year, 10 to 12 to 13% the second year, 10 to 15%, 12% the third year, with an ending total rate increase of somewhere around 30 to 35%.
Do you have an update on that?
If I may respond, those were estimates given by Samco Capital, who admittedly, by his own admission, is not an expert in rates. Our rate study will give us, once we pick a vendor, the details on that will actually come at the recommendation of that particular company. So those specific details that you're talking of, they haven't been worked out to that detail or to that level of detail yet.
And so, okay, so we're basing this on estimates. And
Projected.
it has a projected estimate. It needs to be done, okay? Water storage, the water tanks, to use layman's terms, they've been in and out of this budget for 12, 13 years. And at one point in time, it was thought maybe if we went with Arlington, we wouldn't have to do it. Arlington would refurb them at a discounted price, all sorts of things. So we've come to the end of the rope. They're failing. They have to be replaced. So we're painted into a corner. The same thing with the Basin B1 sewer line. So we're not doing this. This is not the ideal way to do this. This is the way that we are considering doing it because of the, I guess, not quite an emergency, but almost an emergency situation we're finding ourselves in.
I would definitely call it critical. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. There's no more questions. I'll take a motion.
Madam Mayor, I make a motion to authorize the approval of bonds up to $17.4 million for the acquisition, construction, and equipment of various public improvement projects.
Okay, and again, this is the notice of intention because we will then have the actual approval of the bond at a later date. So this is, I have a motion to approve the notice of intention. Do I have a second?
Madam Mayor, I will second, and I appreciate the city's hard work into this matter the last 30 days for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a motion and a second to approve. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you for that. Everybody take a deep breath. It's a big one. We're going to move to something a little more fun. Well, the one before was fun too. Appoint Mayor Pro Tem. Usually spending money is fun, but that wasn't fun. Appoint a Mayor Pro Tem. So what we do is every year, usually after the election in June, usually this, which is now, it comes to us to appoint a Mayor Pro Tem. So I will open this up for discussion or.
Madam Mayor, I move that we appoint Councilman Kenneth Michaels as Mayor Pro Tem.
All right, we have a nomination.
I will second that motion.
All right, there we go. We have a first and a second. All in favor? Abstain? You can vote for yourself. Absolutely, 100%. There you go. Unanimous. I'm glad to have you. And I just want to say just a little bit about Ken Michaels. He is one of the hardest working people I've ever met in my life. And so I'm very, very thankful to serve next to you and very thankful to have you as Mayor Pro Tem. Oh, that's good. Okay. So we'll move on to number 5, approve an ordinance for a senior tax freeze in the city of Kennedale. That's another fun one. And this is going to be, who's going to discuss this for us? Our finance director? Or city manager? All right. You're up.
This seems to be another item that's been discussed a lot in the brief period of time I've been with the city. But a little bit of research I've done, this does seem consistent with neighboring communities having a tax freeze for senior citizens. Budget impact is minimal. I don't necessarily see a downside from a financial perspective. We will need to make up a little bit of funding, but from a personal standpoint, not a financial standpoint, I do feel that the little bit of hardship we might have to face as a city versus the goodwill it would bring for senior citizens, the correct decision would be to go with the freeze.
And just to repeat, I think out of 40-something cities within Tarrant County, there's only about 13 or 14 that don't have the freeze. Is that correct?
I believe it's 14 out of 41.
So
with the 14 not having the cap.
Yeah, the freeze. All right. Are there any questions?
Is it my understanding that this won't take effect until 2024?
January 1.
I just have a comment. I appreciate Mr. Gilly bringing this before council a few months back. I think that's something that we should have done a long time ago. As long as we all understand that, I know it's the impact's minimum. The rest of us have to make up for it. And if we were a dying town, which I don't think we are, I think we capture a lot of young families. But if we were an aging town, this would not be a good idea. As long as our future looks good, I think this is a great idea.
And yes, thank you. And it does say on the last page that the ordinance will be in full force effect January 1st, 2024.
Yeah, just quick comments on it. I think I'm the only member up here that this currently would apply to. So in some ways, I feel like it's almost looks like a conflict of interest. Property taxes are out of control in the state of Texas. It is unsustainable. The problem is much bigger than us. The state legislature has done nothing but expend hot air. And this is not an ideal, it's not ideal. It is just a stopgap method so that elderly people on a fixed income can maybe live in their own home the last 10 or 15 years that they can live in their own home. And it's not a tax cut. No one's taxes are being reduced. It is simply a freeze. And going forward, I suggest that we try to replace this revenue with stimulating small businesses in Kennedale and increasing our business base.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, if there's no further questions, I'll take a motion.
Madam Mayor, I move that we adopt the ordinance for a senior tax freeze in the city of Kennedale.
I'll second the motion.
All right, I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Unanimous. Yay. This does apply to me too, by the way, Rocky. Well, it will in a few months anyway.
If I
It
could,
eventually applies to me, by the way, eventually. I hope to live that long, Rocky.
Yeah, the two ways you look at it, you can look at it as a protection of the existing seniors, or you can also look at it as a benefit that you will look forward to.
There you go.
Because the actuarial tables probably indicate you will get there someday, a lot quicker than you expect.
That's very true.
and this actually was considered, to go back to the bond, this freeze was considered on the projections for the bond financing as well. So all that was done with regard to this being passed tonight.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for your work on that, Mr. Horton.
100%. And we're going to go into executive session pursuant to 551.074 to deliberate the appointment, employment, evaluation, reassignment, duties, discipline, or dismissal of a public officer or employee, or hear a complaint or charge against an officer or employee. And the time is 8:20. Here, we are back from executive session at 9:21. And the only action item that we have from executive session is in reference to council appointing executive officers for all boards and commissions. I do have a motion on that.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that the council amend the ordinance, the appropriate ordinance to appoint all executive officers for all boards and commissions.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? And all against? And all abstaining? Okay, so we have a 3-1-1 vote. Motion passes. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Do
Make a motion to adjourn.
I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Motion carries.